Time is transformational when we become aware of its importance. It is an enigmatic phenomenon. We take it for granted, but we don't fully understand time. As far as we're concerned, it has only one direction. The present moves towards the future, and what we call as now becomes the past. Our life as a whole may be divided into the past, present, and the future. Access to time that has passed is completely revoked from us, but the mind is free to take us there through stored memories. The future is also off limits. The mind is free to imagine whatever future it wants, but nothing is guaranteed. The body remains rooted in the present. We breathe now to live. We cannot depend on breaths taken in the past, and neither can we pin our life on breaths to come in the future. The body is, in a sense, tied to the present. But time wears on the body, and we know it's far from being a permanent entity. The mind depends on the body for its existence, and it goes when the body goes. Living in conflict between the body that aligns with the present and the mind which does not, we oscillate between what is certain and what is uncertain. No one likes uncertainty in their lives, yet we forget that the only certainty in our lives is this very moment. We are living in it, we share it, and nobody can claim ownership. But everybody is free to use this moment as it pleases them. The power of time is compressed into this moment. It is through this moment that the time comes alive as a potent and transformational force in our lives. The key to uncovering the power of time through this very moment lies in the understanding of how to expand ourselves. We equate inner expansion with broadening the horizons of the mind. The mind can only expand into the past and the future and not into the present. Such expansion is limited. Transformational expansion, on the other hand, happens when our awareness is on the moment and we allow that awareness to linger in a non-judgmental and non-interpretive manner. Awareness keeps the moment alive. As an example, a waterfall is essentially timeless. It does not have a beginning or an end as long as water remains flowing. Likewise, as long as we are in the flow of awareness of this very moment, for all practical purposes, time, as the mind interprets and projects, does not really exist. Time does not choose some and leave others out. It is an equal opportunity provider. Everybody alive at this very instant in time has equal access and opportunity to use that time. We control whether we are conscious or unconscious to the passage of time, which then becomes worthless when it is a thing of the past. The future gets its value from our optimism, hopes, aspirations, and dreams. These carry value, but they cannot match the worth of time we have on our hands at this very moment. It is one thing to say, I had a lot of money with me in the past, but what really matters is the money on hand right now. The future may promise to bring great wealth our way, but that's just a promise, a mental assurance we give ourselves and not actual reality. We commonly equate time with money, but they're not interchangeable in a strict sense. With money, we don't necessarily gain time. It simply frees up time that would otherwise be spent earning wealth. Unless time is utilized for personal transformation, it ends up becoming a waste of a very precious resource. We use time as a marker of change in our lives. It is not the best application of time. Instead, we can turn the passage of time into a point of focus for training our awareness. A simple exercise at looking at an analog clock face as we see the seconds and minutes tick away, awareness will start to build. It can become a meditative experience. We can train the mind with repetitive tasks. Looking at the face of a clock and watching the seconds tick by can become a powerful exercise in growing the power of awareness. There is nothing much to a needle moving at a fixed speed of one revolution every 60 seconds. But in that span of time, the mind focuses solely on the present. As we dwell on this exercise, we may also begin to feel accountable for the time that's given to us. Those who become aware of every second that passes will begin to work with a sense of urgency and purpose, not necessarily for their own selfish ends, but as a way of giving something back. Existence gives us time with one hand and takes it away with the other. Our freedom is limited to the span between this giving and taking of time. This is our lifespan. People have different interests and compulsions, so it is hard to say what activity is the best use of our time. For some, the best use may be time spent working. For others, it may be in physical activity. For some, it may be prayer, helping others, creating something new, and so on. But we cannot say that one activity is more productive than the other. The world needs all kinds of people with a broad array of skill sets, interests, and backgrounds. It takes time to cultivate the mind accordingly. Few people go about their lives consciously. Most are living unconscious, pre-programmed lives. A fundamental step towards realizing our true nature is recognizing the value of time. What we choose to spend our time on, although important, is not as critical as being aware of the passage of time itself. When we become aware of this very moment and watch it fade away as the past, that awareness can become the foundation of our inner transformation. Just as a newborn bird must grow and flap its wings before it can fly from its nest to transcend the body and the mind, we must grow the wings of awareness. A bird has a few days, perhaps a few weeks to learn the art of flying, and then it becomes independent. We've been given an entire lifetime, but we choose to become dependent on the body and the mind. Everything in existence on earth shares the same time. All creatures, except for humans, function in accordance with their inherent nature. Humans have the gift of free will, and within the realm of limited consciousness, we can choose how we spend our time. Not so with other animals, birds, or even insects. We allow the mind to dictate our nature. What it means to be a human is virtually unknown to us. We think that living in accordance with the mind makes us who we are, but the mind is a great deceiver. It takes us away from the present moment into a distant past or an imaginary future. Without the mind, there would not be a past or a future. This moment would be all there is and would continue as this moment into perpetuity. The passage of time marks changes and milestones in our lives. Change is typical of the body and the mind. The mind and body have a short past and a potentially long future the moment we're born, and this reverses as we grow older. From the perspective of the changing body and mind, the flavor of each passing moment is different. Time may label the body as young, middle-aged, or old. It may even label the mind as innocent and inexperienced as in a newborn, or mature and experienced as in a fully grown adult. But time cannot be applied to our power of awareness. Awareness does not age, nor does it change. We either discover it or let it remain undiscovered. Once discovered, this power of awareness of the present is a timeless phenomenon. It does not have a past or a future. When we become aware of this moment in relation to the body and the mind, we begin to straddle two worlds. The changing mind-body complex, on one hand, contrasts with the changeless awareness on the other. Maintaining awareness of this moment is possible as long as awareness does not drift back into the mind. The mind will usually take us back to the past or project to the future. It is easier to build a practice of awareness moment by moment rather than look at time as a whole. We have a lot of company at this moment in time. The living principle in the body, the active current of thoughts in the mind, the breathing process, and even the heartbeats. Linking our awareness to any one of these current phenomena will help us remain in this moment in time. With thoughts, it's important to take note of the fact that we should not identify with them. We can then use them as a cue to remind us that the mind works in the present while it takes us to the past or the future. When we work on awareness, it has to be done in this moment in time. It cannot be accumulated like we do our memories and then relive them, or stored for the future as we do with our money. We are standing at this very moment under a rain cloud of time. It opened up a long time ago at our birth, showering us with millions of moments, and will continue to do so until our last moments. Just as raindrops are similar to one another, every moment of time is similar to the next. The mind brings up qualitative differences between any two moments in time using stored memories and impressions. Every drop of rain has value. That value may not seem much for an isolated raindrop, but when rainwater fills up a large and dry lake bed, the value of those collective raindrops becomes readily apparent. Likewise, losing a moment here and there in an awareness may seem insignificant to us. Each moment of awareness is very precious. We are empty without awareness. No matter how much we are engaged in the world or what we do in the world, any activity done without full awareness does not lead us anywhere. We end up becoming like robots. In a 24-hour period, there are exactly 86,400 seconds. For the sake of discussion, if we equate 1 second to 1 moment, it amounts to tens and thousands of lost moments each passing day. How many of those passing seconds do we spend unconsciously in the world of habits and conditioning versus conscious living through awareness? A question to ask of ourselves. This is important because when we live in unconscious awareness, we end up thinking and acting unconsciously. This may or may not be to anyone's benefit. We leave our lives and the future to chance. But when we live consciously, we also think and act consciously, which becomes a recipe for success in life, and nothing is really left to chance. Of the tens of thousands of moments we go through every day, it may not be practical or feasible to become aware of that quantum of time all of a sudden. Even in our everyday working lives, making small adjustments in how we approach our free time will go a long way in making those free moments highly productive. Between any two activities, there's always a little time gap. Rarely do we go back to back all day, day in and day out. If we do, perhaps it may be beneficial to take a little pause between activities as the mind disengages from one activity and re-engages with another type of activity. There is a brief mental slowdown. A form of temporary relaxation of the mind sets in. But during such periods of relaxation, it is common for us to dwell on habitual thought patterns that seek our attention. Instead, we can use that time gap to, during the change of activity as a cue to become more aware of the mind and watch it as it shifts gears slowly from one to another. The moments we lose in unawareness between one activity and another during the day are like precious raindrops that are lost. Every moment counts. For instance, when we finish work and we're walking to a car in the parking lot, it usually becomes an unconscious activity. The mind takes us where it wants to during that time, either back to the workday or to what's coming up in our home life or someplace else. But we can easily turn those few moments into a conscious experience. We can watch the mind as well as the body. Even a few moments spent in such deep awareness will become refreshing for the mind and the body. Our inner being becomes like a dry lake bed when we don't fill it with moments of awareness. Each moment spent in awareness is extremely fulfilling. Just like plants, animals, and humans may depend on a freshwater lake for life-sustaining water, our inner peace and happiness depends on the lake of awareness that we grow. Awareness is indispensable for flushing out mental toxins. Dry, unconscious moments are magnets for negative thinking. Such negative thoughts are aggressive, invasive, and take over our minds. One of the best cures for a mind full of negativity is living a life of awareness. When the mind is already full of thoughts and memories, it cannot hold that power that comes when we are in awareness. The mind has little choice but to empty itself to allow this current to flow through it. As awareness cleans the mind, it also flushes out its residual contents. Long-standing, sticky, and hard to get rid of negative thoughts will eventually be dislodged and completely removed from the mind. During any given day, we encounter hundreds and thousands of negative thoughts. One negative thought, when attended to, can easily waste hours of our time. A simple exercise may help in battling negativity in the mind, and it may even help to clean out the inner world of the mind. Rather than allow negative thoughts to invade our space of attention at random times during the day when we're involved in other activities, just as we have a structured work life, we can also carve out a regular negative hour or a half-hour timeout for the mind. We must decide beforehand whether that negative hour would be either in the morning or at the end of the day. Since we accumulate negative thoughts during the day, probably having this timeout period at the end of the day between work and going home may turn out to be the best possible thing to do. By doing so, there is less chance of cross-contamination between our home and work life. In this exercise, anytime a negative thought may come up, we ask that thought to wait till the scheduled negative hour timeout later in the day. There are two beneficial things that may come out of this exercise. First, and most important, we slowly build a practice of awareness into a daily routine by first recognizing a negative thought and then asking that thought to wait for a few hours. Secondly, we don't waste time during the day dwelling upon and trying to work through a minefield of negative thoughts. Just as misery loves company, negativity loves company, and one negative thought will bring along hundreds of its old friends. Imagine the effort it might take to clear all of them out. No wonder we easily suffer from mental fatigue and burnout. At that negative hour timeout period that we set up, it is not just the mind with negative thoughts that is present at that time. Our awareness is there along with the mind. As long as we have a protective cover of awareness around us, the mind can shower all its negative thoughts upon us, but they may not affect us as much. It may seem surprising. Awareness can easily counter any negativity that the mind may bring up. Awareness also implies being in this present moment of time. There's little or nothing to compare this present moment with, and the mind becomes powerless. The mind depends on comparisons, and mind gets maximum power over us when it manages to surprise us and catch us when we are unaware. But being prepared with awareness, the mind becomes weak. Initially, we may need to contend with a flood of negativity. As we persist in this exercise of setting an hour each day to flush out negativity, fewer and fewer negative thoughts will show up for that negative hour timeout. In isolation, a negative thought has little power. Awareness can easily wash it away. When negative thoughts begin to leave and their impressions on the mind start to become faint and indistinct, the mind becomes a prepared bed to receive the power of awareness. Instead of reminding us of the past or the future, the mind then becomes a potent force in this moment in time. Time is powerful when it is employed by a clear mind that is bathed in timeless awareness.